Good morning again, fellow coffee chat people and anybody out on internet land. We had a coffee chat a few days ago. It's early September 2014, and the topic was on truth, whether that be with a capital T or not. As we can imagine, and as we certainly discovered there at the meeting, there were, based on the numbers anyways, it was well over 20 of us there, so there was an interest in it. But not only that, it's a very broad subject, and it couldn't really be completely covered in an hour and a half for sure. And that's not really the intention of these coffee chats, by the way. It's not the intention really to teach anybody anything. At least that's not the intention of coffee chat, and it's certainly not my intention. It's more along the lines of getting people together to see where other people are coming from, and also to get us to possibly consider other things, to get us outside of our little cage that we might be in, and just to get that thought process going. But I'll do this as quickly as possible. There's a lot of information put out there, a lot of ideas, and I'll try to keep this as brief as possible. So I'm just going to, everybody had a chance to say something, and I'll just put out a few words from what each individual said, and then a few words of my own, and then I'll kind of wrap it up. All right? Okay. In the announcement section, somebody mentioned that there's a visioning class coming up soon. And by the way, you can just respond to this video and get more information if you want. I'm not going to give all the information here. There's going to be a book study coming up here in Saskatoon too, and it's covering one of Bruce Lipton's books. As far as comments that people made on the topic of truth, one guy said that the big T truth is reflecting absolutes and objective truths. And the small t truths are relating to subjected or filtered, filtered truths. Next guy said that truths are based on beliefs. And he quoted Henry Ford, who once said something along the lines of, whether we think we can or we think we can't, either way we're right. Somebody else mentioned that small t truth is opposed to, we would think about it sometimes in respect to opposed to the lie, as somebody might say. And big T truth has something to do with reality. So, and it's philosophical. Truth can be philosophical for sure. Some people mentioned, and I noticed it tended to be women generally, who talked about truth in relation to emotions or feelings. One lady mentioned that she goes with her gut to tell her what the truth is. Quite a few people mentioned that it's related to beliefs, or the beliefs came in to play here. And emotions, another one here, emotions and intuition and thoughts. So this individual is bringing all aspects to get the truth, bring all aspects of our human faculty into it to discover the truth. And some people just asked questions really to get the discussion going. This one gentleman mentioned that question is belief part of truth? So, and how can we know the truth? And how much can we actually know? Because he mentioned that senses can fool us if we're relying on senses only. He mentioned the fact that sometimes at night we might mistaken a bear for a little bush and not heed the danger. So what our senses are telling us are not actually the truth. Somebody else mentioned that truth is a description of fact, or our understanding of fact, and it's what can be proved. Somebody else mentioned that small t truth is like perception, whereas the big T truth is all these little t's put into perspective. I thought that was interesting. he also mentioned that it could be what we believe is true. And I think he might ask the question, what if we pretend it's true? Is it actually true? Or does that make a difference? Somebody else mentioned that truth is always subject to further investigation. Somebody else, truth can be subject to change. For example, new scientific discoveries, what we considered to be true before. Like somebody mentioned the earth was flat, and one time that was considered to be their truth. And then once it was proven otherwise, then it's like a new truth. And then there's opinion of truth also, and that can change as well. Somebody mentioned that actually it's a funny thing how we human beings are sometimes more accepting of lies than truths. But I can relate to that, and I think that there is some truth to that. Another individual mentioned something about Socrates. He went around saying that he didn't know anything, because he was always questioning things. And René Descartes was a philosopher who kept asking himself, what could he actually know? And he discovered that the only thing that he could know for sure is that he could think. And his famous saying is, I think, therefore I am. There's a relationship between subjectivity and opinion, and objectivity is more along the lines of science. But even this keeps changing. Beliefs are full of emotions, and the emotion comment came in a couple of times too. This individual said that emotions are good for decisions we're making down the road, but they may not be good for objective decisions. Somebody else mentioned the big T versus the small t, and some things to consider here. The big T, she was saying, is always valid. It's everywhere and in all instances, and she used the term, this could be akin to what some people refer to as God being the big T truth. And it has to do with right and wrong. It's more constant, shall we say. Whereas a small t truth is, she used the term for us, immortals, and is always changing as information is learned. So it's like learned information. And the small t truth too is like a frame of reference, which may be valid or invalid. And it has to do with the ongoing battle between science and religion. There was also the comment that to know truth, the small t truth anyway, it helps to know the untruths. And that could be the big T truth, I suppose, as well. Somebody said that truth can be measured by factual and logical correctness. And big T truth transcends cultural and personal preferences. There was the author Stephen Myers, I think, and a book called Signature in a Cell brought up. I don't know what that had to do with, but you might want to look it up. So, big T truth, void of errors. Somebody relayed a little story about a lady in Vietnam who's able to talk to the dead. I know this may sound a little bit out of place, but he wasn't so much giving us this information as having a lot of knowledge of it. He was just wondering, how can that be? Because this lady has a high consistency level of being able to talk to dead people and not even knowing them, and the family's confirming that what she's talking about is actually correct about the individual. So he was just asking, how can this be? What is this? So, and I don't think we really got to that. We didn't have time, actually. We ran out of time. And probably nobody really knew, so nobody knew the truth. So, somebody else mentioned that everybody is right from their own frame of reference. And I think he was talking about the small t truth. And how Socrates once talked about asking questions and then questioning the answers. Finally, somebody mentioned that intuition can be used as a truth meter, and because it can feel a lie. All right, now as far as the things that I wanted to share here, I put truth and truth, two different kinds of truth, but they're related. I think they're related, really, the truth and the truth, whether it's big T or small t. Just a spelling thing, but it's just used to indicate a larger truth, I would say, than a grander scheme of things. I said that truth has to do with causality. I mean, fundamentally, how it is that things come into be, you might say, has to do with the causing of things. And on it individually, the causality of things individually, and the causality of things on the grander scale. I'm going to relate to the smaller scale first in terms of ourselves and how we create and how we gain our perceptions and so on. I think there's different processes that go on. There's the mental aspect of ourselves, and that comes down to our thoughts, our words, and our creating of the unseen. So when we initially begin to learn something, we conceptualize it, if you will. And then there's the emotional aspect. But before the emotional aspect, there's the urge for what we want. It seems like a lot of times when we want to find out something, find out the truth, we have to want to. So that want to actually probably precedes the mental thought process. So we create what we want mentally, but we wanted it first. And then the emotions act as kind of like a barometer between the two, the desire and the thoughts. And if they're very close in measure, the desire and the thoughts, then there becomes that driving force, which I would call the will. And that will to act, the will drives the action. So that, the three aspects of ourselves, you might say, are, and we find this in ancient teachings too. The trivium, for example, if we look back at the trivium, it has to do with the bringing in of information, the processing of it, and the output. So it's like input, process, output. And that, the clarity and the more effective we are at that, at arriving at our rhetoric, if you will, or arriving at our, what they used to use, our testament. The old term is not used very much anymore, and there's a guy on YouTube, his name is Mark Passio, he does a good job of explaining I think it's him, somebody else, pass on that, forget the guy's name. He talks about the word testament and how it's basically been, we used to talk about will and testament, now it's just will. But testament is the results. With that's kind of like we can arrive at our truths. That's what we've arrived at in terms of our output. It's kind of like our output is the testament. So I would say that establishes our truths. Our testament is our truth. And then the larger, the aggregate of all of the whole of creation and the whole of creator, if you will, all of that putting together arrives at greater truths. I call it sometimes the aggregate of all thought, of all emotions, and of all actions outputs that greater truth of so-called reality. And we add to that. So in that way, we kind of like co-create the truth, if you will. So, some thoughts on truth. It's, once again, somebody mentioned that a word like truth can have a lot of baggage too. and not only baggage, but it can have baggage for sure, especially the big T truth when it relates to religious connotations and so on, because everybody has there's where you inject emotions and such too, kind of like almost the word faith. I mean, it has a lot of baggage, I would say, in certain discussions. But like every word too, you can pick it through and you could even look it up in a dictionary. There'd be several definitions. So it wasn't so much that we were trying to define anything here today. It wasn't so much that we were wanting to teach anything here today. It's just, if truth is important to us, then wouldn't it be a good idea to consider what truth is? How we can arrive at it? Because if we're really honest with ourselves, so often we do actually live lies and listen to lies quite a bit of the time. So if that's an important consideration, then surely truth is an important one as well. It was nice talking today, and I hope we can talk again soon. Bye-bye for now.